Hello and welcome to Crucible of Words for more dedicated legacy action. Today we've got an extra midweek meta deck for you. This is a deck from Stijn von Dongen, and yesterday I played the deck that made the finals of the Legacy Cup in Amsterdam. Well, this is the deck that split the finals with the deck from yesterday, so I thought it only fair to play them both, and I had a donor who wanted to make that happen, so here we are. So the deck we're playing today is Maverick. This is a Green Sun Zenith based creature deck. So we have our Green Sun Zenith and we've got a package with a few singletons like Questing Beast, Outland Liberator, Scavenging Ooze, the new exciting Wight of the Reliquary, Collector Ouphe, and a Grist the Hungertide, who is best friends with Wight of the Reliquary. So we've got this little package here, and we also have a Renegade Rallier as well. And then we've just got some stuff that we obviously can find, things like Knight of the Reliquary, Endurance, and Mana Dorks, and Elvish Reclaimer. These are things we can find with Green Sun Zenith. But generally, we're trying to get sort of either a Knight of the Reliquary or whatever surgical piece we need to dismantle our opponent's game plan. And then we're backing this up with some Thalia to slow down all these blue decks and all these combo decks. We've got some sweet removal in Swords to Plowshares and Abrupt Decay. And we've got a nice lands package with some Wastelands. We've got a Dark Depths Thespian Stage combo built in there. We've got a Cradle, a Karakas, a Bog, a Dryad Arbor that we can fetch with the Green Sun Zenith as well. So just like a relatively tidy package in there. And we're essentially like a mid-rangey deck that is trying to get some value out of all of our nice little silver bullets. We've got some Once Upon a Time to help smooth out our opening draws. And we're just playing good old-fashioned fair magic. This is the sort of deck that really excels in the hand of somebody who knows what they're doing with it, because there's a lot of little options and you have to kind of get all your little margins with it. But it can really impress you when you see somebody who knows what they're doing with this deck. Now, am I one of those people? Well, I guess we'll find out today. Sideboard-wise, we've got a Maze of Ith that we can bring in for creature matchups. We've got some Hand Disruption to help versus the combo matchups, as well as an opposition agent. We've got some Graveyard Hate in Leyline of the Void, a Gaddock Teague for a lot of these Storm decks so we can shut down Beseech the Mirror lines. We've got Choke for the sort of fairer, slower blue decks, and we've got some Force of Vigors against a bunch of artifact decks. Pretty easy to assess where these tools are coming in, but what comes out is a little bit trickier, but hopefully we'll be able to muddle our way through this one. I tend to find decks like this and Green-White Depths somewhat challenging to play because there's so many different options and you need to be playing for quite long games with this rather than just sticking your big thing and winning with it and protecting it. So I'm curious to see how we fare today. This sort of, the spectrum of Green-White Depths to Maverick is quite vast. So on the one end, you've got like your Mother of Runes style Maverick decks. On the other end, you've obviously got the full-on Green-White Depths, which is, you know, your Knight of the Reliquary, Elvish Reclaimer, and then like a really deep lands package. And then you've got this, which is kind of in the middle, where you've got your Green Suns package. You've got some of these like white creatures, like your Thalias and things. But then for the most part, we're playing just like a deep Green Sun Zenith package to try and get things going. All right, enough about the deck. This is the equal first place at the Legacy Cup in Amsterdam, so let's jam with it. This hand seems reasonable. Collector Ouphe could be great or not so great, but we'll find out. But Thalia is almost always great. And we've got some removal. We can go and get our Lush Portico as well, so we can get some Surveil action going. We've got a Wasteland as well. This all seems pretty reasonable. We get to make land drops and disrupt our opponent in potentially 4 different ways. An Ancient Tomb. Well, that shuts off one of our spells, which means this turn is almost certainly going to be spent getting a Lush Portico. And then we'll work out if we want the Collector Ouphe or the Thalia, depending on what our opponent does. I'm expecting Eldrazi because that's kind of... I think that is the best Ancient Tomb deck in the format right now, actually. We'll see. This is like a Thought-Knot Seer. A Chalice for 2. Okay, our hand is looking a little bit sketchier, but we've got ways out of this, thanks to Green Sun Zenith. Where is our Lush Portico? There it is. That's Surveil action. Once Upon a Time. That can go into the graveyard because we can't cast it. Okay, can't do anything with that. Are we just hitting our opponent's lands here to try and slow them down? Or do we want to make some land drops so that we can work towards having some 3-drops we can cast and some bigger Zeniths? I think we also want to make sure that we have access to a basic forest, just in case our opponent is playing a Blood Moon deck. So I'm going to play out this Windswept Heath rather than Wasteland in this turn. But Chalice for 1 on the play, followed by Chalice for 2 is pretty good against what we got going on. If our opponent wants to do some Wasteland fighting, that's not the end of the world here. It's going to be the Thought-Knot Seer. Glaring Fleshraker. So I predicted the deck correctly. Right, so they're going to pay us out, get themselves a little Eldrazi spawn token. And we are quite far behind right now. We have no castables in our hand. The difference between play and draw here is pretty substantial. So this is not a Blood Moon deck, so we don't need to fetch basic here. So we have a spell that we can cast at some point. I think we're actually supposed to be playing some creatures into these chalices so that we can make our Wight of the Reliquary bigger, if that's the thing we want to fetch off of Green Sun Zenith. But I'm not sure that is the thing we want to fetch off of Green Sun Zenith. I think we're better off getting the Knight or the Outland Liberator so we can blow up the chalice. Green Sun Zenith. So we can Green Sun Zenith with X equals 2 to go and get the Outland Liberator. That's probably where we're at right now. Let's try this. We don't need to get a basic now. I think we get the Bayou so we can cast Grist. That makes sense to me. So if we get the Outland Liberator, we can at least contest the chalice. If our opponent doesn't play any spells, then we can just start attacking with it and shredding their stuff. We can work on having some larger creatures momentarily. Is this going to be a Kozilek's command? Sowing Mycospawn. Okay. That's kicked as well, so they're going to be able to fetch a land here, so they can smash 2 of our lands down if they want to. If they've got a Wasteland to fetch, which they should do. Sowing Mycospawn has impressed me quite a bit. Our opponent's only on 5, so we don't have to do that much to get through. But we need to do something here. They're hitting the Flagstones. Oh, it's exile target land. Yep, that's why. Okay. And this will fetch them up a Wasteland, and then they'll hit our other white source. And then we're not really playing Magic for a little bit here. Yeah, this Eldrazi deck continues to impress me. It's interesting how in the last few years we've had quite a lot of variation in Stompy decks that people are playing. And we've had Initiative, we've had like the classic mono red Stompy, we've had the blue Stompy decks with like Patchwork, and now we're back to Eldrazi. Okay, so if we don't cast any spells, which seems very likely, I think we have to just take this. So if we don't cast any spells, this will flip. It'll be a 3/3, so it will stop the Fleshraker attacking. And then we can start attacking our opponent and crunching through these. I think we just want the Wasteland here. And unfortunately, I think we're just going to pass. Try and use our lifestyle as a bit of a resource. Our opponent might be incentivized to keep something back to block as well. It's possible they can cast 2 spells, especially with things like Kozilek's Command, which usually chains into another Kozilek's Command. But we can't beat them if they have a Kozilek's Command here. So it's just the Mycospawn attacking, I believe. Yep, we can get it 8. If they cast 2 spells. Okay, they're not casting any spells. That's good news for what we're trying to do here. So we need to attack with this. Let's get rid of this. Chalice on 2, I think. Right, and just jumping with this, as expected. So we can Green Sun Zenith where X equals 2. What does that get us? Nothing much. We can play out this Thalia. We can play out this Collector Ouphe. That's a reasonable thing to chump block with. And that unlocks our plow for next turn, in theory. Actually, if we go get an Elvish Reclaimer here, that's a 3/4, which does a pretty good job at slowing their attacks down. Okay, so next turn we can probably blow up their other chalice, and then that unlocks our plow. And we're kind of stabilizing here. More mana is probably not what our opponent wants. They've got plenty of mana over there. They can Kozilek's Command and remove cards from our graveyard. But like I said, if they've got Kozilek's Command, they'll probably beat us, because that plus Glaring Fleshraker is quite the combo. Devourer of Destiny. That puts our opponent to 1. Okay, they're going to blow up our Elvish Reclaimer. This gives them 5 power to attack with this turn, and we're going to be on 7. Actually, we're going to be on 6. Okay. Do we have a way of attacking our opponent for 1 point of damage through what they've got going on over there? I don't believe we do. Elvish Reclaimer. So we can attack with this and blow this up. We can plow this, which then forces them to block with... Actually, it doesn't force them to block because they're going to gain loads of life. Let's just check our options. Scavenging Ooze doesn't help us here. We can attack, plow, this, get the block here, play the Reclaimer, block the Mycospawn, and we're still dead to this or any colourless spell our opponent has. If we play out to blocker, can't plow. I don't see any way out of this one. Yeah, I think our opponent's got us. Alright, let's go to the sideboard. So I would quite like to not get bodied by Chalice again. And the Maze of Ith looks pretty good here. Gadok Teague does have use because it stops Kozilek's Command, but it also stops our Green Sun Zenith. It's kind of an awkward place to be. I think we're going to not board in the Teague for this one. So what are we looking at? Our opponent isn't a graveyard deck, so we don't need Scavenging Ooze, although it is a creature that can grow, but I think we've got better options for creatures. Things like the Questing Beast looks pretty good here. Endurance has a really good power and toughness for our opponent who's running 3/3s and 2/2s. So I do still like the Endurance here. The Collector Ouphe has some merit, but we're not really trying to shut down our opponent's artifact mana, so I don't think this is where I want to be. Abrupt Decay is another answer for Chalice, so we want to keep that. This leaves us trying to cut one more thing. If we're bringing in the Maze of Ith, can we take out a land? Probably not. I guess we could take out the Bajuka Bog, actually. That looks pretty reasonable to me. Like, this is like a mid-rangey creature matchup. It's just they have got some prison pieces that if they get them down in the right places, it's going to be a bit of a pain for us. But if we were on the play on that game, I think we win it. Okay, we can keep this one. So we start off with 3 Once Upon a Time and then work out what we're doing, whether we're casting the Hierarch or doing something else, depending on what we find. We can use the Rallier to ramp us with a fetch land next turn as well, if we just want to have more mana. But will we want more mana, or we want to use this to double up on an actual card so we can like send in some attacks or whatever? But we'll find out. Right, free spell. Let's be good. We did discuss the Body on Endurance being pretty tasty here, but I do also like Knight of the Reliquary. It's a strong thing to be doing. I would take the Knight, and I think to leave open the Rallier plan, I'm going to just play up the Hierarch here. So next turn we can Catacombs into Knight or Catacombs into Renegade Rallier, depending on what we need to do. So if we do the Rallier, that gives us the mana to actually cast a Plow as well. And it gives us a 4/3 on attacks, which is reasonable. A Dismember. Alright. We are not doing the plan now. Understood. So we can play out this Hierarch. I think it's better to get the Lush Portico than it is to save this Verdant Catacombs for a Renegade Rallier. Although this could be our black source, so maybe we're supposed to hold this. But we're just going to see what our opponent does. If we need to plow something off the bat, then we can do that. Hard cast Once Upon a Time is not what our opponent wanted to see. We can now tap our Verdant Catacombs for mana as well, which is interesting, thanks to our opponent's Yavimaya. A Null Drifter, a Lotus Petal. Now I have to make a decision. I don't think we want the Lush Portico, because it does cut us off of black, which might be a thing we need if we draw a black card. And because it's taps for mana, we don't have an urgency to necessarily crack it right away. A Cradle. What does that do? We can play these things, play the Cradle, then what? I think I would just like to get the Knight of the Reliquary going. In that case, do I want this Knight to be larger than it is now? Which means cracking the Verdant Catacombs. I believe that is the case. I guess we can hold up the Catacombs in case we need to grow it for some reason. I think we're just going to go and get our black mana source here. And this way we can leave up white. So we can either attack for 1 with the Hierarch, or we can hold up Swords to Plowshares. I think I'm going to hold up the Plow. If they play something like a Thought Not Seer, we can kill it after with the trigger on the stack. Just get the body out of here. So we can use Knight of the Reliquary and Renegade Rallier to sacrifice lands and bring them back. Okay, so we could be looking at a Thought Not Seer this turn. They have 4 mana available. They could also do a Sowing Mica Spawn. Disruptor, Flute. Okay, this is probably going to name Knight of the Reliquary, I would imagine. Yeah, well this means that we are just going to be attacking with our Knight of the Reliquary now. Okay, let's just go to attacks. It's a quarter of your life total, opponent. That's not nothing. I'll play out the Cradle. This gives us access to Endurance if we want it. So we can go from 4 damage a turn to 6, and that's a 2-turn clock instead of a 3-turn clock, which is pretty big. Here is the Null Drifter. This is just drawing them some cards. I don't believe they have a way to make this stick around. It's something that you can cast for 7 mana, whilst also being a thing you can cast for 3 mana. I quite like it. I'm seeing a lot of different innovations in the Eldrazi deck, so it's going to be curious to see what ends up being the best. Okay, I don't really care about that. We're just going to flash in our threat at end step. Do I want these cards in our opponent's deck? I guess so. Our opponent's not going to shuffle their deck, so they're just going to be on the bottom. We'll crack this. Let's get Lush Portico. Get a little bit of Surveil action. Put it into our graveyard. And we're attacking for quite a lot now. Do I want to play this Renegade Rallier out? We could have got 1 more damage if we did this first. Do I think our opponent's going to have any Wrath in blue-green? I don't think that's the case. We can't cast this Plow anyway. Yeah, I should have done this. Actually, no, it doesn't make a difference, actually, because it's the same land going into the graveyard for the Knight, actually. And we don't have another Surveil land to fetch, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, there's no other Surveil land, so we were right just to not do that straight away. Okay, Wasteland, not really bothered by you. It's just going to be the big 7 mana guy. Kozilek's Command. This is going to exile this card. And I'm going to make 3 chump blockers. We don't have any more Revolt to trigger in our deck. So I think it's worth taking the marginal thinning here. I'll get a Dryad Arbor, because this allows us to attack with another creature. Dismember is off the cards for our opponent, and that's most likely their only removal spell. Karakas isn't really the one here, is it? Well, these are 0/1s, so we can attack with all 3 of these guys. I probably don't block the Arbor and just go to 3. Yeah, our opponent agrees. Press Karakas. Right, so I need to have 1 blocker to survive a turn, which should be pretty elementary for our opponent to put 1 creature into play. Okay, Glaring Fleshraker is multiple creatures most of the time. Oh, they didn't float off that Yavimaya before they played it. Alright, and they scooped. Okay, I like how we've changed things up here. Again, I think it's more important to have our Green Sun Zenith live than it is to get this Galaxy as an option. Yeah, I think we're just going back in. Kozak's command is awkwardly very good against the old Maverick token. But we can normally see if they've got that mana up when we make our token. There is no Sajiri step in here to fetch with the Knight or the Wight. What does this hand do? We have 2 Plows, which is a good card in the matchup. We have this Dryad Arbor that kind of stinks. If they have some like Chalice on 1 action, this Plow becomes very bad. But I don't think we can throw away double removal spell into a aggro matchup. It is awkward. Alright, so they've got a Devourer of Destiny in hand. Their own little Once Upon a Time. This card is really good, the Devourer. Back in the day, we used to run Once Upon a Time in Eldrazi to sort of fix our opening draws. And Devourer can kind of do the same thing, whilst also just being a big thing later on. Just the one downside is that you don't get the card immediately if you're on the play. So it can kind of mess with your... Interesting, just an Arrogant. Yeah, so it can kind of mess with your mulligans because you can't keep a hand based on that. I think we just have to play out the Dryad Arbor and get that out of the way. Hate it, but it's the place we're in right now. Our opponent wants to Wasteland. They didn't do anything before anyway. Sowing Mycospawn. Well, this is already looking pretty bad for us. There's a Wasteland, yep. Thought that might be the case. Yikes. So I think we're better off just ploughing this rather than getting the Reclaimer down. If this was a Mana Dork, I'd play the Mana Dork, but it's not. Ancient Tomb. No other follow-up. Okay. A land? Please draw a land. Not a land. Okay, let's just play our Reclaimer. They know that we don't have any more lands, so they're very incentivized to Wasteland us. They can kick a Sowing Mycospawn, which is pretty scary. Is this like a Thought-Knots here? Oh wow, no, they have enough mana to Devourer of Destiny. Yikes. Whew. That's a large creature. Oof. Like, we can kill this. Alright, a land, that's something. Let's just plough this now. Yeah, the Ire is going to be a problem because they're going to start just tutoring for Mycospawn soon. And then we're going to be in trouble. 2, 4, 5, 6. They still don't have enough to do this. Because this is not a colourless Eldrazi, so it doesn't get to use the Eldrazi Temple mana for 2 on it. Land, please. A land. Okay. What are we playing out here? I think it's probably just the Knight. We can save ourselves 1 damage due to our opponent's Yavimaya. This gives us a way to Wasteland our opponent, if that's what we need to do. Alright, we're getting dismembered here. This means that our Wight of the Reliquary will be bigger. Alright, so now they can start activating their Ire to chew stuff up. They can also just cast a Null Drifter, which I think will kill us in relatively short order. That might be... Okay, no, they're just going to be tutoring. Okay. What is the plan here? Getting Grist to Hunger Tide doesn't do that much because our opponent's just going to get the Devourer and kill it if we do that. So we're probably best off deploying 2 things so our opponent can't answer them both. So black, green for the Wight, and then we'll play the Thalia. Our opponent doesn't really care about the Thalia attacks. So we could have brought in our 1 of Opposition Agent to try and beat specifically Ire. Maybe we're supposed to do that instead of one of these Thalias. Let's see what our opponent goes for. A Devourer of Destiny. Okay, so they're going to answer 1 of our threats. Presumably it's going to be our Wight. But they can just continue to do this over and over again until they run out of those cards. We've reached a late game that is much more powerful than our late game from our opponent. We didn't get the screws in early enough. And now they're just going to be overrunning us with massive yacht after massive yacht. Okay. Goodbye, Wight of the Reliquary. Yep. Our Thalia is not big enough. But at least they didn't Sowing Mycospawn us. Another land. Yeah, our opponent just wants to keep making land drops. It's quite nice as well that the Eldrazi deck doesn't have to play any City of Traitors. Oh no, we got another massive thing. They can make another 7-drop here if they want to. Not sure we're going to be able to come back from that. Alright, it's a Once Upon a Time. A Null Drifter. Okay, that's horrible for us in other ways. What is our solution to this problem that we are in? Well, I guess everything probably starts with a Knight of the Reliquary. I think that's our best thing to do here, but we can't do that whilst Thalia's in play. We could go and get an Elvish Reclaimer, which does similar things. It does just feel like all our creatures are going to get outclassed here. So if we get the Reclaimer here, we can block and bounce our Thalia so that we're not taking damage, and that also frees up our Greens on Zenith next turn. But the problem is they're going to draw some more cards off this Null Drifter, and then they're going to be Annihilator 1 for us every turn. Okay, so they get to cast this Fleshraker and the Null Drifter. Whew. Yep. I'm not feeling spectacular about this one. Our hand was a little bit shaky, but we had to double plow. We did need some more land, and we have found more land, and our opponent hasn't punished us for the land too much. It's just, if this game goes a little bit long and our opponent starts shooting for stuff with Ivugin, then it's going to be lights out for us, I think, and that's where we're at. Okay, so Fleshraker pinging, making some tokens. Null Drifter coming in, making another token, pinging us some more. Have they drawn something else they can cast? They have. Okay, once upon a time. A Boseiju. That's probably not what they were looking for. They just want more threats. So the 6/6 comes in, we block, and we bounce. This buys us a little bit of time. Maze of Ith is decidedly bad against Null Drifter though, because they still get the Annihilator 1 trigger even if we bounce it back. Neither Reliquary isn't even that big at the moment, which is another problem. We need to draw plows are the sort of thing we're after. That's very much the case. So we have to plow the Null Drifter here. And then what are we doing? We just never get out from underneath this Null Drifter otherwise. So we can Zenith for 2. We don't really have a good 2-drop to Zenith for. The Wight's already gone. So I think we are just doing Reclaimer things. Yeah, I think it's Reclaimer things. Another Once Upon a Time. Is that better than just tutoring? I can play a Myco Spawn. I can tutor and play a Myco Spawn every turn if they want to. How are we supposed to beat that sort of engine? How are we supposed to beat this sort of engine? Okay. We're trying to fight a good fight, but it's hard. We only have one Modern Horizons card in our deck, and our opponent has many. That seems to be the issue. Okay. This is going to come in for a big bunch. We can't just get a Wasteland and try and take out this Ivugin. That's not going to work for us. Yep, the Fleshraker comes in too. Another Yavimaya. We got another follow-up. Alright, we just get rid of this forest for now. Everything's a forest due to Yavimaya anyway. What is our solution out of this one? How good is a 2020 versus our opponent? It's not the worst. So if they attack, we can block this, take 6. Are we on that line? I think we're on the try to draw Dark Depths line. Sure. I think that's the way. Noble Hierarch. That is not the Dark Depths. You can pay 2 to go and get the Dark Depths, but we're 1 mana shy of being able to do it. If we'd drawn a land this turn, we could play the land, use 2 mana to crack it, and then Thespian Stage to make a 20/20, block here, take 6, kill our opponent. We don't get to do that now. So we need to spam some permanents and try to survive that way. Oh, yikes. So I guess that's a Hierarch to block with. How big is Knight? 1, 2. Knight is 2, but we want to go and get our Dark Depths, I think. So if we block here and here, we sacrifice a permanent, we take 4, we can't block everything. I don't see a way through this. No, I think our opponent's got us. Oh, that was quite brutal. I think the first game we win if we're on the play, because we at least get to play a 1-drop and a 2-drop. And we weren't a million miles away from stabilizing that first game. So if we'd just had 2 more spells that we got to cast out of our hand before the Chalice shut us off, then I think we'd have been fine. So yeah, tight margins, but there's some powerful stuff going on, and I do like to see Eldrazi back. But maybe I won't be saying that a few months' time after getting beaten down by it, but we'll find out. Alright, let's go to round 2. We're a little bit land-light, but I do believe in the healing power of Noble Hierarch. Changing Outcast. Yep, this is a Ninjas deck, almost certainly. Especially with the Ornithopter. So Wasteland is something our opponent can do to us. Let's have a free spell. We were looking for land. I will take the Savannah and like it. Do I want to play the Savannah or do I want to play the land that I care about getting Wastelanded less? This does ping us for 1. I think I will play this out there. And we'll play out the Noble Hierarch. Okay, so we're going to get some sort of ninja into play this turn. No. Interesting. Feels like our opponent is going to counterspell the next thing we play. I'm going to play around Daze, I believe. I'm just trying to think. Do we want the Reclaimer and then the Liberator into Daze? Liberator is okay here, but not incredible. Reclaimer is kind of bait for this Knight. I'm going to play out the Liberator. Our opponent didn't do anything last turn. I don't really just want to play into this Daze. We can attack with a 1-2, but they have an 0-2. Ooh, this is the flip land. The other side is a bounce spell. It can also bounce spells. It's pretty cool. We're going to see a ninja this time. We are. They're attacking with the Ornithopter as well. That usually means... Are we supposed to... Okay, let's just put the damage through. Because if they attack with both, it means they flip this out and then this gets 2 triggers. But we somehow escaped that. Okay, I do not mind attacking with our Frenzy Trap Breaker here. Attacks for 4, and we get to blow up the Ornithopter. If our opponent isn't doing anything with this Springs, I think that means we're supposed to try and get the Wasteland action going. So we'll hold this up to play around Daze, and then we can take them off their land. Alright, there is a Force of Wood over there. Do I still want to take them off of their land? They've not been doing anything on 2 mana, so I think that's probably the case. We have the Superior Clock. It's just whether or not our opponent can find a ninja and reload. Are we going to see a Brazen Borrower or something? Just a Murderous Cut. Okay. 1 card left in our opponent's hand. They're about to draw one for their turn. We can Green Sun Zenith for another Knight. It does play into Daze. Our opponent pitched another one of those lands. No, they didn't pitch one. They pitched this. Another Force of Will is what they pitched. So we could get a Knight, put plays into Daze. Or we could play Reclaimer, hold up the Abrupt Decay. Honestly, I'm fine holding up the Abrupt Decay, I think. Current situation, the board is alright for us. So we can attack for 1 here. I don't believe our opponent has a Bowmaster, they would have just picked off our Noble Hierarch earlier. So we can Lush Portico at end step if we want, or we can go and Abrupt Decay something. A Brainstorm is a good card. Chances of our opponent finding a ninja seem pretty high at this stage. Underground Sea. So no fetch land. A Dauthi Voidwalker. I will crack this in response because we want land cards in our graveyard. Probably just want another Savannah here. You can have your Dauthi Voidwalker. A Changing Outcast is just going to keep nipping away for 1 because it can't block. And it can't be blocked. So it should keep coming for us. I'm okay with doing this. Just keeping the pressure on Thalia. That's interesting, isn't it? So we could play this Thalia out. See what our opponent wants to do about it. Then jam this Cradle. And then we can get a big Cradle going here. Do I want a Questing Beast? And just try and get this game won quickly? We can't do a Questing Beast, right? This is 3. The Thalia makes it cost more, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay, no, we can't do that. But we could save it for a turn if we wanted to. But we just get the Knight here. Or we could get the Endurance and start our opponent's roll. Or we could get the Grist and start pumping out tokens. There's quite a few options here. If our opponent's got things like Murktide, I'd like to hit their graveyard. But I don't think they do. Just want a Grist. Grist is just going to pump out lots of 1/1s. Is that good enough? No, we'll just get the Knight. And then our Reclaimer can attack. Yeah, there's no way we could put Questing Beast into play this turn. But next turn we can crash for a decent chunk if we want to. Using our opponent's cantrip, I believe, here. A Murderous Cut. Yeah, so that's one of the reasons I wanted to get the Endurance for more Del spells. But this means we're not worried about a Murktide and we're still quite far ahead on board. Alright, we take 1 damage, but we've got the Superior Clock. I think I'm just going to sacrifice this. Gives us a 3/4. Once upon a time. Right, let's cast this. See what we can find. Haven't played a land yet. I wouldn't mind wastelanding our opponent, keep them under the Thalia. So we can attack for 5, or we can attack for 3 and rotate something with our Reclaimer. I think we're just the aggro here, and we're just going to beat down. It's not like getting other lands does that much for us here. I don't think it's worth giving up 6 life that we can hit our opponent with. Right, a 2 mana Ponder. That's not what our opponent wants to be casting. But they're in a bit of a bind. Alright, they've had enough. Sideboarding against our opponent's deck. Choke certainly feels like it's a card that I'm somewhat interested in. Maze of Ith again. Our opponent's trying to deal combat damage and get triggers with it, so I like that. Thoughtseize is interesting, as is the Force of Vigor, because they might have the Retrofit's Foundry. That's usually a common card. I don't think we can afford to have these Thoughtseizers in. Galaxy can shut down some of our opponent's things, like Force of Will and Murderous Cut. But I don't think it's better than any of these options, and I don't think we can board out more than this. So Collector Ouphe can shut down their annoying thing that I just forgot the name of now, I just mentioned. What's it called? Retrofitter's Foundry, that's the one. So that can shut that down. Scavenging Ooze looks pretty good. Outland Liberator looks good. Do we even need these Force of Vigors if we've got Outland Liberator and Collector Ouphe and Abrupt Decay? Maybe we don't. I would like this Maze of Ith. And I would like the chokes. I'm not really sure where we're cutting. I think the Collector Ouphe is probably better than the Force of Vigor because we can tutor for it to just shut that thing off. So that makes sense. I guess we could trim on one of our dorks. I like the Birds of Paradise that can block an Ornithopter. That can give us a Maze of Ith. And if we want these 3 chokes, I like the Grist quite a lot here. The Rallier probably is one of the weaker ones. We're just going to upgrade it to a choke. I'm still looking for 2 more slots. Whenever I board out Once Upon a Time, I always get people in the comments telling me not to board out Once Upon a Time. So we're not going to board it out. But what are we going to board out instead is the question. Do we need Wight of the Reliquary if we have Night? Maybe I'd just rather have a choke. And then if we want this last choke, how are we going to fit it in? Kind of thinking about trimming 1 Once Upon a Time. We'll just trim 1. We'll leave 2 in though. We're leaving 2 in. That's fine. 2 removal spells and a 3rd removal spell. A land that's kind of a removal spell and the stinky Dryad Arbor. Wasteland is going to be a bit cruel. But we have 2 removal spells and a removal spell on a stick. Okay, so you've got Prismatic Vista over there. Basic Island. My choke welcomes you. So they can still ninja on 10-2 because they've got 0 drops like Ornithops they could cast after this Ponder. And exactly like that. Okay, what of our lands would I most like to have wastelanded? We want to be able to deal with whatever ninja is coming up. So I think I'm going to play this Maze of Ith. So if our opponent attacks and puts in a ninja, we can then say no to it. It won't get to do its trigger then. And this way we might be able to plow a slightly juicier target. A Brainstorm. But we need to have something in play to stop their card advantage straight away. So it's either the Savannah for plow or the Maze of Ith. And I'd rather lose our Maze of Ith than one of our few actual mana sources. So that's the logic I'm going with there. Next turn we can possibly play the Arbor. But we'll see. It's going to be the little guy. I don't think it is. Thalia. I think I just want to get this Dryad Arbor out of the way. The one downside with doing this is if our opponent has a Wasteland and they Wasteland the Maze of Ith, we don't get to plow their creature. But this is kind of not a land for another turn still. So it's a real tough decision here. They have a Wasteland and they hit our Maze. I guess they're more likely to hit the Maze. We're going to throw caution to the wind and play this Savannah out so that we can at least interact for a couple of turns. Not a Wasteland. Okay. A Douthie Voidwalker. That is a card I am okay to try and plow. I will not do anything with my Maze of Ith here. We're going to try and plow this. Our opponent could have a day. They did not. Okay. A choke. Looking forward to you later. We need to draw some more lands. But we've got some stuff going on. It's just like a Dismember. Goodbye, Dryad Arbor. I hope our opponent doesn't have 2 Wastelands in hand. Psychic Frog. Yep. That's a very strong Magic the Gathering card. Doesn't feel very ninja-y. Just running good cards. This is kind of like a ninja whenever it deals combat damage. I'm going to plan this now in case we find a black source and need to decay this. Alright. Our removal spells are just working today. We can't fetch a Dryad Arbor. Okay. We could always endurance our Dryad Arbor back in and then fetch it, but that feels like a lot of cards to do that. We're not that desperate yet, but it might come to that. Our opponent's hand has to be reactive. And by the fact they aren't protecting their Psychic Frog makes me think it's going to be removal. Or it could just be loads more threats. Alright, if you've got a card we can cast, that's always a pleasure. What is this? Another land. Okay. Got 2 cards in hand, so we can't really afford to block this Psychic Frog. Shoulder's Edict. I will sacrifice a non-token creature. I guess I will. They have 1 card in hand. So we can flip this out of play, or flip this out of combat. If they have a ninja, then they get to put an ninja in and draw a card. Alright, no, they're doing it now. Okay, so just doing it this way. So that whatever happens, they get to draw a card. I guess we flip out the one that deals the most damage, because they both draw a card. Alright. I'm going Hellbent to pump up the frog to make sure they deal 2 damage. Alright, deck. We need a little bit of help. If we can get a black source, that will do quite a lot of work for us. Alternatively, we could just not draw anything. Alright. So our opponent is drawing 2 cards a turn, possibly more, depending on what they have in hand. Thalia, Inquisitive Student. That's a pretty good one to ninja back, isn't it? You get a little of extra value along the way. So now it's correct to do the frog, because this can be more damage. But if they turn this into a ninja right now, that's going to be real bad for us. Alright, they didn't do that. I think the window on this game being winnable is closing, but there's still a chance. Like if we can find our removal spell, or our land for our removal spell. Oh, jeez. Okay, I guess we'll go to clean up. This also shows that Collector Ouphe is going to be good to stop these as well. What am I getting rid of here? I'm already stuck under my Thalia here. So our opponent's now drawing 3 cards per turn cycle. It's a lot of cards. This is not a ninja. This won't draw extra cards. Same name as the frog. Okay, just drawing a card first in case they find a clue. Sorry, not clue, a ninja. Off the clue. I was going to flip their Thalia. We don't care about that for now. We're losing to what's on the board. Our hand was a little shaky when we kept it because of the lands, but the fact that we just didn't draw more lands is kind of annoying, isn't it? Okay, let's just get a land out. I think I like the Bird of Paradise more than the Noble Hierarch right now, because we may need to chump block in the air at some point. Also, we need the black mana for the Abrupt Decay. Alright, goodbye Birds of Paradise. Getting murderous cutted. We are. We could have tried to prevent that using a proactive endurance. I'm not really sure that's the way to go here. Maybe we have to do that because the spot we're in is so bad. But if we can survive, we've got some cards to deploy in our hand that are quite powerful. Thalia keeps on ticking up. That is a problem we'll have to worry about later. A Thespian Stage. That doesn't actually cast us any of the things we require. We can cast a Choke, but our opponent hasn't got any land to tap, so that's not very good. I think we're just going to cast this Collector Ouphe. Maybe we can cheese with a Maverick Lage token at some point. It's just high cast Force of Will. Looks like it. Okay. So they're going for the ultimate on Thalia, so they're putting up to 8 rather than getting a Force of Will back to protect. Both lines I think are fine and probably winning the game. There are quite a lot of swamps that are going to get impacted by our choke here. Drawing Hive for Library and dumping it into Psychic Frog is quite a lot of power as well. We have to suit 2 Psychic Frogs, we just can't deal with them both. Alright, Ingenious Infiltrator, you can have your Pound of Flesh and your free card. And Ornithopter. We have a Black Source. At this point we probably have to stop the Thalia, because our opponent's just going to draw their entire library. Well, half their library. It's tough. But next turn we can try and ambush something with a Endurance and hope that our opponent doesn't have enough cards to answer that. Alright, bounce back the Frog. Take 2 from the Infiltrator. A second Psychic Frog has hit the battlefield. Okay. What does Green Sun Zenith do for us here? I don't think it's better than casting Endurance around days. Well, here goes nothing. Let's have Endurance. I imagine they're going to give both of their Psychic Frogs flying, because why not if you're about to lose your graveyard anyway. Or they can get rid of cards they don't want in their deck, so they can bin off the lands. And one other thing to give one of them flying. Let me just want them all back in. Sure. Go to blocks. Oh, I hate this. I hate this so much. They've got so many cards in hand. We'll block here. Some more ninjutsu stuff going on here. So hitting us for 5. So we can't use our Maze of Ith. We have to keep it back in response in case they pump their frog. They were waiting for us to Maze of Ith, I believe. Okay, so our opponent gets to draw 4 cards here. Psychic Frog is basically like the ninjas, but without having to jump through hoops of ninjutsuing them in. Which feels pretty good. And it's also bigger most of the time. And it has evasion. What a ridiculous card. That's not the reason we're losing this game. If we have drawn land on the turn we needed to, and just put it to like kill one of their creatures, and then got to jam and endurance before our opponent was drawing 2-3 cards a turn, we would have been alright. But that's not what's happened here. I don't really want to show our opponent choke if I can avoid it, because I don't think we're winning this game. Okay, so we can block those 2. How do we rustle our way out of this one? Questing Beast. We could get another endurance, so we could block here, and we still die to the other frog. No, we can bounce that back, we die to the Infiltrate. Yeah, we are done. Frogalicious. Don't want to do anything differently here. Kind of regret not having the mana from the Hierarch slightly. Maybe I'm not as big on chokes as I wanted to be. Does that mean I just want another threat like Wight or the Reliquary, or do I just want to keep 2 chokes in? I think Mana Dork into Choke is a nice curve. Alright, we'll do it like this. Our opponent has shown us non-basic blue sources that aren't islands in that Sink into Stupor card. I can't remember what the other side's called. So they're not just completely cold to the Choke. We Green Sun into Thalia, into more Green Sun. I think that's probably reasonable. We've got a piece of removal, which doesn't hurt. Send in the Zenith. Let's go and get your friend of mine, Dryad Arbor. So play the Polluted Delta and cracked it for a basic island. Oh, a Brainstorm. This is interesting. So the reason it's worth doing this is in case they hit an Ornithopter. So normally you'd want to be able to shuffle away or whatever. But if you find an Ornithopter, I can set up your turn to ninjas. A Birds of Paradise. I'll play a Birds of Paradise. That means our opponent won't be able to be unblocked. And then I think we would just jam a Thalia here. Which allows us to do some big greens on Zenithing next turn. If they answer our Thalia. But I have to imagine this is worth answering for our opponent. Nope, okay. That's going to make all their cantrips a lot worse. Early on it really impacts delve spells. Later on it's not such a big deal against delve spells because it just means you delve one extra card. But right now they obviously don't have a lot of tax on that. A Changeling Outcast. Sure. A Windswept Heath. We could go and get a Hierarch and attack with our 3-2 Thalia. That doesn't seem the most exciting to me. I think we will attack with our Thalia though. And we're going to hold up for a Lush Portico, I think. I just want to play this Collector Ouphe as a card that does things. So we can Karakas bounce our Thalia. We can Lush Portico. We can cast Swords. We've got a lot of options in our opponent's turn. No activated abilities for you on Ornithopter. A Prismatic Vista. More islands. Sheoldred's Edict. Each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature. What is the worst creature here? Probably Collector Ouphe, isn't it? We take one. Can live with that. Lush Portico. If we draw one of our black cards, we can still cast off of the birds anyway. And Surveil is too rich for me. Yes, please. I would very much like to have this. This Ooze going. No attack in. There's no point in removing anything with the Ooze now because they can... They've got 3 mana, so they can do a Murderous Cut anyway. There's a lot of mana in our opponent's pool. Back to basics. Sure. It didn't attack with a Changing Outcast. That is interesting. Right, I would like to exile this Collector Ouphe from our graveyard. It makes our Wight of the Reliquary smaller if we draw it. But that's it. A choke. Oh, that's so tempting, isn't it? We don't have the mana for it, unfortunately. Because of our own Magic the Gathering cards. This can't block. It's very odd why it's held back. A Psychic Frog. That is something that is going to require some attention from us. I think we messed up there. We're supposed to take this Ornithopter out while this is on the stack. Because now they can just exile it with the frog to stop us growing. Oh no, they let us get the counter. That's really handy. Questing Beast. That's not a spell we're casting, is it? Right, in comes the 4-4. If our opponent dumps a bunch of cards into their frog, we can then plow it. So we need to make a decision about our opponent and whether or not we are messing with their frog at the cost of our Source of Plowshares or not. Just the Outcast. That is curious. 3 cards in our opponent's hands. They can make their creature a 4-5. We had similar options last turn. A Wasteland. Champion goes under the bus. We can play a choke, but it's not great right now. We could Green Sun Zenith for 2. No, only for 1 because they're in Thalia. Yeah, it's kind of awkward. That gets us a Mana Dork, but it costs us a load of our land and turns us off of Source of Plowshares. So I think we're just going to continue this current trend we have of turning our Scavenging Ooze sideways. Right, pumping the frog. Just the Outcast again. Sure. Yuriko. That one is probably good enough to get a plow. We now probably have 1 card off the Yuriko and then block it for the rest of the game. Potentially. We need to put something else in front of it, but we can probably do that. Or we can try and nail this frog before they draw an additional card. Alright, I'm going to try and nail the frog now. The hope is our opponent can't really leverage these cards in their hand. Alright, they can force it. They can leverage that card. Yeah, it's going to be tough. Well, they reveal Sink into Stupor. Yeah, it's a good one. That's 3 damage. They've got 2 cards in hand, so the frog can beat our Scavenging Ooze. But we can grow our Scavenging Ooze potentially. They can go all in on this frog to trade with our Ooze here. They missed a previous exile from their graveyard, so we're kind of hoping they miss this one too. Do I want to grow it 1 more? I think so. Is that true? I don't think it is true. I think we just take the 4 damage here. then we'll use our birds to cast another mana dork. We'll probably throw our Thalia underneath the Yuriko bus. That at least gives us a respite from damage, and it unlocks our Green Sun Zenith to be a little bit bigger. Kind of getting caught underneath our own Thalia a bit more than I would like. We have an Outland Liberator we can fetch next turn. Just the Yuriko. Alright, I will block this. I hate this, but I think it's the correct thing to do. We could just play this Questing Beast and just try and kill our opponent next turn. That is a thing we're allowed to do. Or attempt at least. Play something they can't block. Play like this and 2 Ornithopters. That'll make me happy. I don't think they're going to play Ornithopters when they have a frog here. Kind of getting murderous cut vibes from our opponent now. They're bouncing our Scavenging Ooze. Okay. And now they're playing a Changing Outcast. Alright, we've got a pretty annoying turn for our opponent to deal with now. Well, we've got several options here. We could just jam this Choke, giving up 2 lands. Or we could play this Questing Beast. This Questing Beast can only be blocked by a Psychic Frog if they discard a card in their hand. So this is an instant 2-for-1 and puts us miles ahead. They get 1 extra card off the Yuriko. If the one card in their hand is Daze, we lose, I think. But I'm willing to take that. We haven't seen the Daze from our opponent yet. This is a pretty savage beat stick. Good old Questing Beast. Yep, so they got to put a counter on their Psychic Frog from their hand, because this is power 2 or less, can't block it. Yep. So they have to discard or dismember. Oh, this feels so good. Then we get to take out their frog, and then we've got a Vigilance guy back on block so the Yuriko doesn't just auto swing into us. They do get a trigger off the Changing Outcast. Oh, that felt pretty good. Got the frog off the board without ever drawing any cards. So attack with just the Outcast here and get a card. We can't block because that's what the card says. And they got an Emrakul in their deck. Yuriko. Another Yuriko. That's probably not going to do it. And so they got 1 card in their hand. It's got to be good. A blue and a black. Shoulder's Edict. I will sacrifice this Dryad Arbor, please. And that should be the game, because we know the other card in their hand is Yuriko. Yeah, we got the GGs. Yeah, there were some interesting games. We managed to put it together in the end. There was a turn where we almost had the Choke, which would have been pretty funny. We could have, like, thrown our Thalia at our opponent and hope it died to cast the Choke. And then we'd have been stuck under back to basics. They'd have been stuck under a Choke, but I don't think that's how I want to play that game. Alright, we are 1-1. Let's go to round 3. We've got a lot of mana in this hand, but we can use one of these to be a Lush Portico and get a little bit of selection. We've got some interaction with our opponent. It's not spectacular. This can be a Dryad Arbor, this can be a Lush Portico. That ends up being alright, I think. I don't think we're going to Green Sun Zenith out of Dryad Arbor here. We've already got loads of land. This is going to be a threat of some description. So we'll probably lead off on a Windswept Heath, or actually no, probably the Misty Rainforest, and then use that to go and get a Lush Portico. Actually, does it matter with that where we use our fetch lands? I don't think we have any basics apart from our 1 forest. Yeah, our only basic is a forest, so we don't need to really think about how we're using these Misty Rainforest and Windswept Heath. A basic item from our opponent into a ponder. Could be a lot of different decks. It's more likely to be Scam and Delver if they've just naturally drawn the island, because a lot of Delver decks don't even run an island. They did not shuffle off that ponder. Another Green Sun Zenith. Does that make me want to Green Sun Zenith for Dryad Arbor now? I don't think so. So we'll go and play this Misty Rainforest, and we can go and get a Lush Portico if we need to. A Prismatic Vista. We're playing slow interactive magic over here. Alright, let's get our Lush Portico. Or is our opponent like secretly a Dreadnought deck and they're about to stifle us? They're just playing around us being able to stifle them. Our opponent's already quite far down on clock, even though we're only just into the beginning of the first game, so this could be a long one. Once Upon a Time. Yeah, that's pretty good. We haven't cast any spells yet, so this is many looks at something. I'll take the best card on the top of my library rather than just 1 card. So we're casting an Ice. Okay. Ice out of that start. That's an odd one. Alright, let's have a look. I will take one of these Knight of the Reliquaries, please. So I don't want to Dryad Arbor off of this one, or do I just want to hold up a Plow? That seems fine. Start jamming Knights. That was a very aggressive Ice there. I think our opponent might need lands, and they wanted to cycle that for a card, which means the best time to do that usually is to really stop your opponent playing a 2-drop, so there's a little bit of tempo. There's an odd choice. A Narset. Alright, are we going to get Days Undoing here? Source to Plowshares. That's obviously irritating, but we can force our opponent to pay through the nose for it. And we can play this Windswept Heath, and then we can get Dryad Arbor and finish off the Narset as well. So at least make it more difficult for our opponent to do anything too scary. They could cast the Days Undoing this turn. Could take all of their mana. Another Plow. And a very lovely mountain there. Big fan of the Onslaught ones. This makes me not too worried because we can still get our Dryad Arbor and attack this Narset. And that takes wheels off the table. Or one-sided wheels at least. And a Ponder from our opponent. Dryad Arbor. It's a threat. You thought it was a land, but it's a threat. We know there's another Plow coming. But choose our ordering of threats carefully. Just try and finish off this Narset. We're not looking to draw extra cards, or we don't want our opponent to just cast Days Undoing and send us back into the stage with nothing to do. Our opponent could be a back to basics deck, so I think that encourages me to play this Forest out rather than this Savannah. I'm going to play this Knight. It's going to use up our opponent's white mana next turn. So we've got this Knight. We can do some sort of questing beast stuff next turn, or we can Green Sun Zenith for a Grist, which is usually really powerful in these sorts of matchups, because a lot of their removal doesn't hit it, you know, their plows or whatever. We've got a Brainstorm end step. I'm a little bit worried about our opponent's pace of play, considering their deck they are playing is quite a slow one. So they might not be able to finish this game if it goes to 3 games, which would be a shame. There was the Plow that we knew was coming. A 4th Eorlingus. Understood. This feels like a good time to deploy the Questing Beast. Do you have a Force of Will? If they do, then they probably win this game. Alright. We don't get to do anything here. And our opponent's quite far ahead. Sure. You're going to draw 5 cards in this turn in total. That's a lot. How are we supposed to beat what our opponent's got going on? We could ambush them with an Endurance. And we could Green Sun Zenith something out here. So we're probably looking for Reclaimer more than anything. Start getting to work with that. We've got nice Flagstones that we can turn into something a bit more useful. And we've got this Endurance that can come down, ambush one of their knights in combat, or just give us multiple attackers to get through our opponent's stuff. Prismatic Ending, yep, that's pretty good. They've got a lot of good cards in their graveyard. Do I want to put those cards into their deck or not? Like high cast Force of Wills and stuff are available for our opponent here. I don't think I want to put all these good spells into our opponent's deck. We could have put our own Questing Beast in, but that does shrink our knights and whites. I'm going to plow one of these, get attacking. They have a plow too. It's just so hard to come back from this. Our opponent's just drawing extra cards every turn. This is the high cast Force of Will. It is indeed. I think this game is over. It's a case of how long do I want to play it out for. If they played a Mystic Sanctuary and put the 4th Eorlingus on top, we can just call it a day. Like, there is a possibility our opponent's hand doesn't do that much, but it's so unlikely. Okay, let's plow this and see if we can get 1 point of damage through with our Dryad Arbor. They're going to plow this, so we don't even get it back with the Renegade Rallier. Well, they're brainstorming. They're going to block with it, so that's not too bad for us. It's not great, don't get me wrong, but it could be worse. In comes the Rallier. I think I prefer a Dryad Arbor. Or if we get the Windswept Heath, we can actually cast the Wight the Reliquary next turn. That makes a little bit more sense, doesn't it? At least we got a Revolt trigger. I could have plowed that and stopped that from happening. Not that they really expect us to be running Renegade Rallier. It's a pretty sort of niche card. You don't see very often. Okay, our opponent's got 24 cards left in their deck. Feels like they don't have a removal spell in hand, they're digging. If they don't have removal spells, what do they have? A Narset. Okay. Narset is pretty good against the Monarch. We're always fetching a black source with this, so we're going to go get it now. For the very, very marginal thinning. We've already used our Revolt card, so we're not going to be drawing any other Revolt stuff. We have to attack them to get the Monarch. We're not going to get a card off it because of the Narset, but it stops our opponent drawing cards. So I'll have to take that and live with it. Is that better than just killing their Narset and letting them have 1 extra card? That is a question, because the Narset is a card anyway, but it's one of their top 4, so I guess we're probably supposed to take the Narset out here and leave them with the Monarch, which sounds horrible and wrong, but I think that's the case. Have to play this out. I am worried about removal, like mass removal from our opponent. But just having a 3-2 in play when our opponent's still on almost full life is not going to be enough. We need to put more pressure on our opponent. And if we can untap with the white and having another creature in play, then we get a decent amount of options here. We can go and fetch the Dark Depths and things like that. Right, it's not going to stay in play. Understood. And they had spot removal rather than mass removal, so that worked out alright for us in the end. Just another big 4th Eorlingus. It is. I think we're winning this one. But maybe we have Marit Lage and our opponent doesn't have the ability to stop us. That is what we're playing for now. You know me, I love a bit of Marit Lage action. We'll keep this one. This dies. This gets us a Savannah out of our deck. So we're getting some marginal thinning here. We've got to do everything we can to find our good friend, Dark Depths. What does this find us? I don't think Grist is going to cut it. I think I want an endurance here. I wouldn't have minded a questing beast here, if I'm being honest. So maybe we should have shuffled that in before, but then we wouldn't have been able to get the Windswept Heath out in order to get our land to play our Wight at the Reliquary. Back to basics. 2 rounds in a row we've had some back to basics all up in our business. Makes more sense with the ice, but that's kind of cute. Not sure how good that actually is. Our opponent's not very good with keeping their clock managed, so we're going to play this one out. We'll do this. This prevents more damage over multiple turns. The opponent's only got 13 cards left. First striker, yeah, I'll take that. No, we've got 5 minutes on our clock more than our opponent, so I'm willing to use this as a resource to pressure our opponent in later games. Prismatic Ending for 2 mana, yep. I don't believe our single draw and forest is going to keep us in this game. But I'll keep our opponents behind us on clock. Okay, that was awkward. I like the chokes. And the Gadok Teague is very good here. I don't really want to get jammed up by a bunch of the things our opponent can do. Don't want Force of Vigor just for back to basics, or we're going to rely on Outland Liberator and Abrupt Decay. That sounds like it should be enough. We just want to overload on threats here. Are we needing Collector Ouphe? No. That can become the Gadok Teague. Do we need Once Upon a Times? If we're boarding in 3 things it doesn't find, maybe. Do we need Bajuka Bog in our deck? Our opponent has shown us they're playing Snapcasters. We could play the Thoughtseizers, but they're such a bad draw later on. I'd rather use them to break up like combo decks than something like this. We just want maximum threats. How many plows do we need? I don't think we need all of those plows. Do we need any of these plows? Our opponent hasn't shown us anything like Flage, but that could be in their deck. I don't mind having a couple. Let's have another Once Upon a Time. And let's just go maximum threats and see how that pans out for us. Just try and overload them so they have to answer every single thing we do. Okay. Thalia is going to tax our opponent early on. We can get Hierarch into Thalia. Ideally, we'll find some more lands somewhere down the line. We have lots of threats, and that's what we want for this matchup. Just constantly pressuring our opponent's life total. So they can't just sit back and gain loads of extra cards. They have to answer what we're doing. So there is definitely some tension with Gadok Teague and the Green Sun Zenith, but our opponent basically can't win the game with Gadok Teague in play because they can't cast their Fourth Lingus. And they're going to remove our Gadok Teague, otherwise it's going to slowly beat them down at some point. So we may as well have the Gadok Teague as an option to reach for. Our opponent's down to nearly 11 minutes left on their clock. We've got our basic land, so eat that back to basics. We'd love to just draw a land for the next couple of turns. Just let us deploy these things in our hand. Basic Plains, we're going to see an ending on our Hierarch. We are. Okay. Now would be a great time to draw a land. A Green Sun Zenith, or we can cast an Elvish Reclaimer. I think the play here is Green Sun Zenith for 1. For 0. This is a bit of a sign of weakness from us, but we need some more lands. And if we have to use a Green Sun Zenith to get one, then that's what we got to do. Alright, our opponent took about 5 minutes that turn, and we are back in the game. Let's get ourselves a Savannah and cast Thalia. We can curve this into the Elvish Reclaimer as well. Getting that brainstorm value. Get it while it's 1 mana. Alright. I imagine our opponent's going to prioritise getting this Thalia off the board because it really messes with what they're doing, which then allows us to redeploy another one, and that will hopefully annoy our opponent greatly. It feels like our opponent's double queuing because they come make a load of plays and then sort of disappear for ages. Fire. Yeah, that was certainly a good name for that card. That was absolute fire. Just get another Thalia down. I've got 11 minutes more on my clock than my opponent. This has been somewhat frustrating a game to play. Alright, so they've got a Narset now. What is it going to reveal to us? A plow, of course. Black mana has been a little bit tricky to cast with this. A Dark Depths, you say? Are we attacking Narset with both creatures? Or are we holding this back to then turn it into something else? So we can turn this Dark Depths into something more profitable. I think we're just going to clear the Narset. No need to mess about. We'll play out this Dark Depths though. It leads us into potential Thespian stage drawers, which can be pretty annoying for our opponent. They have to keep open 2 mana to plow it. We're going to see a Wrath here. Could be. There it is. Yep. Let's cast Once Upon a Time. Let's get this land that we require and pass. We can get Lush Portico, but I think we just have to get a Bayou here. Our opponent's now below 4 minutes on their clock. Oh, Narset, sure. They're just digging for 4th Theolingus. Feels like our opponent's going to win with like a few minutes left, or like a few seconds left on the clock here. It's going to be very tilting for us because we've been sort of sat here waiting for some time. I want to put these cards in our opponent's deck because they are not 4th Theolingus. So that makes me want to play this Endurance. I think that's the play here. We know they've got the Plow, so it's going to die. So we need to get a little bit of value off it anyway. There's the 4th Theolingus. Sure. If our draws had been slightly better to punish our opponent, that would have been nice. But alas, is not the case. They probably all have to attack given our opponent's time on the clock. No, they're not going for it. It's just mean they've got a Force of Will as well. As our opponent's hand just like really, really good. And they're just playing slowly to drive us somewhat crazy. Chuck this back in. Let's get off the block here. Let's get our Lush Portico. We're kind of just in shields up mode here, trying to survive long enough. Green Sun Zenith. 1, 2, 3, 4. We can't do it for enough, but it is a useful card to have. I want to get a Questing Druid. That would be Questing Beast would have been a really good find. I don't think we're attacking here. I think we are just playing the most expensive spell we have and holding back on blocks. So they're going to plow one of these creatures at end step, most likely the Knight, because that's the best creature we have. There it is. But that's 6 life. Our opponent's got to work through this in 2.5 minutes. Certainly doable. Teferi, sure. If we can find a land and just stick a Questing Druid, we might be able to just win this game outright. We have to dodge our opponent having a Force of Will, though. We found the land. We can just ice our creature, though. Yep. Feels like we're getting the ice. There it is. Alright, they've got a minute and a half, and they're taking their time on the ponder, as is their tradition. Yep, back to basics. That shuts us down. Presumably there's a removal spell or something for our Questing Beast. And we're going to die with like 10 seconds on our opponent's clock, despite them being more than 10 minutes behind us. Okay, we actually have a play here. No, we don't, because the Teferi. Yeah, no, our opponent just has it all. This has been one of the most irritating games of Magic the Gathering I've played. I don't mind my opponent just bopping us, but when they're doing it without... with the horrible use of their clock, that's very frustrating. We can't Green Sun Zenith. We could Green Sun Zenith for Dryad Arbor by pitch casting this Endurance, tagging ourselves. Okay, the second main phase, and then cast this Green Sun Zenith for 1. We'll get a blocker for this Snapcaster Mage. Alright, they've got 66 seconds. If they find another 4th Theolingus, they can just win the game. Like, their deck has been smashing us, for sure. It's just the lack of making plays for 5 minutes straight that is bothering me. Prevents multiple damage. 16. Our opponent has 41 seconds to turn their creatures sideways. Our opponent says their son is crying in the next room. So maybe they got some life stuff going on and that's why they spent so long playing. But that was very infuriating from our side of the board. If we'd have had marginally better draws, then our opponent times out. We just needed to have like 1 land, 1 turn earlier. And I think that's probably enough to make our opponent time out on that one. So, yeah, quite of a frustrating one, but hopefully everything is okay with our opponent and their kid. You don't know what life is going on around some people sometimes. All right, we have 3 rounds in the books. Let's go to round 4. Okay, I like our hand here. We've lost the die roll again, but it is what it is. We've got Reclaimer. We've got Once Upon a Time to smooth out things. Wasteland Ether Vial. Okay. Could be like a weird deck, like Slivers or something, or it could just be like Death and Taxes. Could be Merfolk even. There is a new Merfolk that people like playing. What do we want here? I will take a land. Oh, I kind of want the Collector Ouphe. Take the Collector Ouphe. I think we're just going to get a Forest for now. Just guarantee our Collector Ouphe to shut off this Ether Vial next turn. Another Wasteland. Okay, so you're saying that our Collector Ouphe is going to be good. That's what I'm hearing. Attack with our Reclaimer. Getting the bits in. If we were on the play, this game would be very different. Because we wouldn't have taken the Collector Ouphe from that pile. They can Wasteland our Wasteland if that's the thing they're interested in doing. Another Ether Vial. I'm sorry, opponent. I feel like a bad guy. Knight of the Reliquary. Sure, we'll attack with our Collector Ouphe here. And I think we'll just play the Knight out. Just start going for some big creatures. I think we should have attacked with the Reclaimer if we were planning on doing that. We've missed a point of damage that we didn't need to miss. I decided not... I was planning on just playing the Reclaimer and holding up a Reclaimer. But in the face of Wasteland, I think it's better just to get your creatures up and running. So I should have just attacked for the extra one. It might not end up mattering, but if it does, that's on me. A Wasteland. Okay, so now I think I do want to hold up the Reclaimer. I'd rather get the damage in with the Knights. So we can have lethal damage next turn, right? 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah. We just Reclaimer and then we can Wasteland our own land. That gives us everything we need for our Reclaimers to be online. And pumps our Knight by a little bit as well. Okay, an island. So our opponent probably is on Murfolk. That's what this tells me. Let's fetch land. Let's crack this land. We can get a fetch here. Might as well get a fetch. We can crack that and our Reclaimers are large. Let's just make more large things. There's a lot of damage. So the island they've shown us probably means they are on Murfolk. Which means these chokes look pretty reasonable. And I think the Force of Vigor is an interesting one. Like, it's good against Vile. But it's not very good against the rest of their stuff. The Maze of Ith looks good though. We do not require a Bajuka Bog, so that can become a Maze of Ith. How are we fitting in these chokes? I think we want to keep all of our removal. I like the Outland Liberator here. Scavenging Ooze can go. Collector Ouphe, as we saw, was pretty good. Probably don't need the Renegade Rallier. That leaves us looking for one more cut. Endurance isn't great here. It's you know, it's a guy, it's fine. It can trade up nicely into some of their stuff. Or just gobble them up even. And that's fine. I think that's probably the weakest. Or the Thalia. Like, the Thalia stops a lot of their free permission. Like their forces and their dazes. So I do kind of like the Thalia for taxing them on that front. I think I like the Thalia more than these things. There's going to be a lot of creatures, but we're not going to put them into graveyard because we're going to be exiling them. Alright. I think that's fine. Yeah. We can choke our opponent out on turn 2, potentially. Counter Souls, naming Murfolk, I assume. There it is. Given the nature of what we've got available, I think I want a Savannah here first. We can fetch the bio for the other one, because we're about to play a creature that produces white mana. So there was no Vile on our opponent's part, and they played a land that doesn't care about choke. Alright, just to dismember. Sure. Another Cavern. Maybe these chokes aren't as good as I think they are. Tide Shaper. This makes the choke look pretty bad too. Maybe I've misjudged this. So this is now just an island until we can kill this. A Savannah. I guess I'll plow this and then play our Reclaimer if this resolves. And then we have access to Abrupt Decay next turn. It can snipe out a Lord. We can start Green Sun's anything for something useful soon as well. Grist would be a nice find because that's going to be a slightly more difficult one for our opponent to interact with. Nothing from our opponent there. They're paying costs. Something with Flash. Murfolk Trickster enters the battlefield. Tap type creature and opponent control loses all abilities until end of turn. Do I want to rotate with my Reclaimer? I think I do. We just let that go. A Noble Hierarch. That seems a-okay to me. This allows us to get a Knight of the Reliquary. The Wight of the Reliquary doesn't feel amazing in our deck. Like, it's nice to sack off some Mana Dorks later on, but I'm not really sure if it's worth running black in our list for here. But then again, I'm not the Maverick expert. It's just my take so far. This does need to be a black mana. I do want it now just to take out this little guy. Are we saving this removal, or are we just like going pedal to the meadow and just playing all our things out? Feels like we're about to get Murfolk Trickstered again. And tap our Elvish Reclaimer. Okay. I think we will get ourselves a Green Sun's Zenith for 3. So our opponent got Forcible for this. They do not. Grist the Hunger Tide is kind of an interesting one because our opponent can pressure it quite well with what they have. We could just get the Knight of the Reliquary. It's going to be pretty sizable. Seems reasonable, doesn't it? This can be dismembered. Opponent's already used one dismember though. Our choke looks terrible. I think I will board out these chokes if we go to a game 3. This is suspicious behaviour, isn't it? What could they have? Some sort of graveyard hate. I think we just take the 4 here. Maybe that's cowardly. But we're going to crack back for 5. And we've got 2 removal spells in hand, so I don't feel like we're just going to get blown out. Like, if they wasteland us, then we just end up with a bigger creature. Sure, Aether Vial, that's kind of already run its course a little bit, I would say. We can attack with our Knight of the Reliquary for 5. Depending on the Reclaimer, we can hold up a Reclaimer activation. We've also got Plow and Abrupt Decay available. They can't really attack into our Reclaimer because we can then make it a 3-4. And I'm okay to trade my Reclaimer for a Murfolk. Well, it won't be a trade actually, will it? It'll be a trade for whatever their piece of removing our graveyard is going to be. That's the thing they have. They've definitely got some sort of flashy thing. Okay, a Hex Catcher. Well, we have an uncounterable kill spell, which is pretty good against the guy that makes everything counterable. Makes everything into Force Spikes. If I'm familiar with this one, you can sack Merfolks to Force Spike, a non-creature spell. We could double block a Merfolk Trickster and then kill the Hex Catcher. A Lord of Atlantis. It's a pretty good one. Our opponent do some attacking. Oh, no attacking. That is unexpected. Let's have an uncounterable way of killing their guy. And then there's no dazes available for our opponent here. So let's just try and take out their Lord of Atlantis as well. Okay, Force of Will here. That's their hand gone. Right. This choke looks rubbish. Let's play out this Maze of Ith. We can turn it into something else if we want to. We attack with the Knight for 5. It's third of our opponent's life total. Okay, then we just start rotating things away. These Violets cranking up. But I don't know what it's going to give them. They couldn't cast on 3 mana anyway. I think there's 4 drops in the Merfolk deck, really. Okay, so they're trying to kill our Maze of Ith. I would like to turn this into something else. What would I like this to be? Part of me just wants this Flagstones. What is their piece? Like, if they've got something that ruins our graveyard. This makes their guy into a 3/3. Sure. They got another one? They do have another one. I see. So we get this Lush Portico going. Get a little bit of Surveil action. Green Sun Zenith is pretty good. Actually, no, we don't get the Surveil action, do we, at all? That was annoying. Should have thought that through. So we have Maverick Lage combo if we want it. We can just hold back and have that as a thing that we can do. And just chump block a bunch of stuff. So this will be attacking for 7. We can go and get another land. That's 8. Wasteland is 9 and 10, right? So 7, 8, 9, 10. So they have to block the Knight of the Reliquary. So I think we'll force it to take out one of their lords. No blocks. Okay. Sacrifice this. We go and get... Dark Depths seems pretty reasonable here. We can make a Dark Depths token. And that's 10 damage. We got the GG's. Alright. That's 4 rounds in the book. We are currently at a 2-2 record, which means we're playing for a positive record. It is kind of where I expected myself to be playing Maverick, because I'm not very good with the deck and it does require a pilot who knows exactly what they're doing. But let's see if we can get a positive record. Okay, we've got basic leading into a Thalia. It's reasonable. We could also just play the Flagstones into Thalia. That's also reasonable too. Makes Wight the Reliquary harder to cast down the line, but we're going to want this Flagstones for turn 2 anyway, I think, so we'll play the Flagstones. And Urza's Workshop. This feels like we could have a bit of joy off our Thalia here. Right, I play this Mox Opal out ahead of our Thalia. Smart. In comes the Thalia. Right, a Grim Monolith. So we could play a threat, or we could just take out this Grim Monolith before it ever gets to make mana. And I quite like the sound of that. That takes them further away from Metalcraft as well, so that is going to be cramping our opponent's style a fair bit. And play another land and lose their city. Another Grim Monolith. Understood. Play another Workshop. If we can get Metalcraft, then things can certainly go awry for us. And we don't really have much... Alright, they're just tapping the Grim Monolith now. For another Grim Monolith. So this turns on the Urza's Workshop and the Mox Opal. So didn't really get to stall them for very long there, did we? But I think it's worth a shout, because what our opponent's doing is probably going to go pretty big. Paradox Engine. Yikes. Like, it's not as if we could blow that up with an Abrupt Decay anyway. Knight of the Reliquary. That is the better card to cast here, I believe. I'll play Assessment Stage. Crash for 2. If our opponent's got any spell, then I'm pretty sure they can just string out whatever they want here. If that spell is like the One Ring, then we're almost certainly dead. We need to Green Suns for a Collector Ouphe. Sharpish. Glaring Fleshrake. Alright, that's what our opponent's doing. Is this a Kozilek's command? No, it's just the One Ring. Just the One Ring. With 4 mana floating. Alright, our opponent is probably going to go off in a big way here. The Fleshraker makes it very hard for them to fizzle here, because they can cast things very easily. Obviously the Paradox Engine's helping. It's just going to be a case of whether or not the next activation of the One Ring finds them what they need. Okay, there's a Basalt Monolith. I don't believe we can win this game anymore. They've got all the mana in the world and now they're drawing with stuff. Yeah, I think we can call this one a day. It's been a long old league, so I'm looking forward to trying to wrap this one up. Let's smash some Force of Vigor, Galloc Teague in there. Thought Seizers look pretty good. I don't think this is an opposition agent match. They could have regular Urza's Saga as a thing. That might be something we want to consider. What looks bad here? We need the plows for their annoying guys. I don't think we need Scavenging Ooze or Bajuka Bog. They can go. We don't need the endurances here. They can go. Collector Ouphe is obviously exactly what we're looking for, so we want to have their Once Upon a Time to try and hit them. Thalia is certainly useful. Killing the Glaring Fleshraker does feel like something that's important. Renegade Rallier is probably too slow to get that sort of value off of. The Questing Beast can pressure Khan through their horde of guys, so I think we need to keep that. Removal of the Grist is pretty good. I think Wight of the Reliquary is probably a bit suspect here. That can go. And that leaves us trying to find one more cut to keep all of these things in. Or we could just not have the opposition agent. I think not having the opposition agent probably is fine here. We'll try it like this. Yeah, sign me up. Just get our free Once Upon a Time. What are we looking at of these ones? Is it just another green card or do we want another land? I think we just want to secure the other land. We take the Nurturing Peatland here. And then we can play the Lush Portico tapped for a chance at finding the Collector Ouphe next turn. Do we want this? No. So we got this Force of Vigor to try and get us through to Collector Ouphe. No play on turn 1 from our opponent is good. That's no Grim Monolith or anything like that. That's what we're doing here. I think this turn we can play out the Elvish Reclaimer. Holding up Force of Vigor. Hopefully Collector Ouphe can do some work for us. Now, our opponent almost certainly has some dismembers they brought it in. The One Ring. Yep. That's pretty good at ruling them all, I heard. Okay, so that is going to get shut down by our Ouphe. If they find the removal for our Ouphe, then we're in trouble. Tap for 1. We might be able to Questing Beast next turn, which is the quickest clock we can provide. We just need to bury our opponent before they can get out from underneath our Ouphe. City of Traitors. I can play another One Ring, which means we probably just do a setup turn with Grist instead. Actually, that's not true. The clause on Questing Beast is damage can't be prevented. So if they play another One Ring. Alright, the Kozilek's return. That's pretty bad news for us. Who gave these decks colourless removal? Glaring Fleshraker. And a Mox. Yeah, our opponent's just doing unfair stuff, and we are quite a fair deck. So if we can't live with our lock piece, then we're gonna just get buried, I think. And that's what's happening right now. We have to save our Force of Vigor for something like Paradox Engine, really. I think it's worth just taking out Mox Opal. Mana is certainly not the problem for our opponent here. Yikes. I wonder if they've got Phyrexian Metamorphs. I feel like a good thing to play copying Glaring Fleshraker as well as copying a bunch of their other things. Look how much mana they have. Like if they have a Kozilek's command, we just lose the game right now. We've got another one. I didn't have another one, but we are certainly behind to what our opponent's got going on. So we could just bap our opponent with the biggest creature we can muster that they can't block. That feels like the plan here. And let's just hope that they can't string anything else together for next turn. They're on 7. They're unlikely to be able to attack into us here, but they might not need to. So the Exalted from our Noble Hierarch could be lethal next turn. And there's a Saga. That's the sort of thing we want our opponent to have. Something that's going to take a couple of turns to cash out. We just need to survive the immediate. Paradox Engine. That is pretty disastrous. So we've got a Force of Vigor now. But our opponent just kills us with these 2 Fleshraker triggers. Yeah, we got absolutely bodied. Yeah. Our opponent was playing an unfair deck and they absolutely annihilated us because we're, like I said, we're a fair deck. We've got some levers we can pull, but we basically need our thing to stick. And those decks are now way better because they've got, well, Fleshraker is obviously very good and it's going to be a very hard thing for us to get through. But then they've also got the Kozilek's Command now, which is a real danger town for us. So, we unfortunately finished with a 2-3. And 2 of the rounds we lost were 0-2s as well. So we did kind of get punked a little bit. But I think it's always going to be tricky to play this deck into something like a dedicated control deck because we're kind of playing a slow, fair creature deck. So just lots of pinpoint removal like the Jeskai deck had, even if they're playing really slowly, is going to smash us to pieces most of the time. I would much rather be the Jeskai deck in that situation. And then when it comes to the sort of unfair combo decks like the Glaring Fleshraker combo, they're just doing something that operates on a very different access to a lot of things we have access to. So yes, Thalia can slow them down a little bit. And yes, Collector Ouphe could do work. But they probably have 4 Kozilek's Command and some number of dismembers. They could have like 8 answers for our one-of thing. And that's just not enough in this day and age to try and deal with that. And we didn't have that many tools we could bring in. Sure, we're bringing in the Thoughtseize and the Force of Vigor, but Force of Vigor does nothing in the face of the One Ring. It does nothing to Glaring Fleshraker. The Thoughtseize would have been helpful. Maybe we take away the answer and then we can stick our Collector Ouphe. But we have to keep a hand that has a Green Sun Zenith for Collector Ouphe in that matchup, and it just didn't get us there, unfortunately. The Gadok Teague can certainly mess with them a little bit, but I think the Collector Ouphe is the better thing to get there most of the time. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if we get the Gadok Teague there, it shuts off the Kozilek's command. It shuts off... It doesn't shut off the One Ring because they already had the One Ring active, didn't they? That was the issue. And if we get the Gadok Teague, they start just drawing lots of cards with the Collector Ouphe and finding ways to get through... Sorry, they're drawing the cards with the One Ring because we didn't get a Collector Ouphe. And then eventually they'll find an answer to Gadok Teague anyway. The Glaring Fleshraker, they can cast underneath the Teague and just play their 0-drops, and that's fine. So, yeah, it feels like that's going to be always a really tough matchup for us. I think the other matchup we lost was the Eldrazi deck, which is kind of like a fairish creature deck, but they just go bigger than us. And that's going to be difficult for us to really sort of get through. So, yeah, a pretty tough run of it with our deck today. I think my general perspective is I would rather play more into the green-white depths deck than the Maverick side, but that is more about me as a player enjoying playing the depthsy type strategy. I'm not great on the sort of Maverick. It's too fair creaturey for me. But we gave it a pretty good go today. We only had a couple of missteps that I caught, like the Lush Portico timing off of the Flagstones, for example. That's an interaction that I should have not stacked that way, but that's fine in the end. It didn't really matter in that particular game. But I think if you put in the reps with this, as we've seen from the fact that this split the finals of the Legacy Cup. Clearly, if you put in the time to learn this deck and know all your matchups inside and out, you can certainly get a lot of purchase. They were undefeated in the tournament. The two people in the finals, so the deck we played yesterday and the deck we played today, they were both undefeated and split the finals. So, you know, this deck is clearly a real deck. It's just quite far out of my wheelhouse. And I look at hand and think this hand looks fine, but maybe I'm wrong. I just don't have the necessary reps. We did get a bit busted up a few times. It felt a little bit unlucky. And we certainly had hands where we were just not drawing lands, which jammed us up a bunch too. What I will say is I'm not personally convinced that this deck needs to be playing black. Like, we have Grist the Hunger Tide. That is a thing that we're mainly going to be getting off with the Green Sun Zenith, but the more black spells we play, the more you think, okay, we're gonna actually have to fetch some black sources earlier on and stuff like that, because when we were having these cards, they sometimes just sat in our hand and did nothing. And I'm not convinced that we need these black cards here. Yeah, out of the sideboard, the Thoughtseize definitely makes a lot more sense. But I'd rather see something like Vexing Bauble. That would be something I'd like to see in this deck. That card has impressed me a lot in a lot of matchups. It really helps beat a lot of the unfair decks, which is something that I think we'll struggle with this deck. So being able to curve, like, obviously Vexing Bauble and Thalia is a bit of a weird nombo because you make their spells cost one more. So they will be costing one more than being free. So that is definitely an interesting number to think of. Maybe the problem is... No, the problem is not Thalia. That's definitely not the problem. That's sort of like the best card in the deck, pretty much. Well, it's not, it's one of the best cards in the deck for sure. Yeah, I just don't really have the expertise with these Maverick-style decks to really say what should be changed to fix this one. All I will say is I would be a lot more comfortable playing just a green-white Maverick deck. We maybe get a little bit more utility going, and we don't have these black cards that sometimes jam our hand up. That being said, the Abrupt Decay did come in clutch a couple of times. The Wight of the Reliquary never really did anything. I don't think this is a good deck for Wight of the Reliquary, because the only thing we're really going to be sacrificing to it is Grist tokens. But if we've got a Grist ticking up anyway, we're probably in a reasonable spot. And just sacking some mana dorks in the sort of late game anyway, which is fine, and we can certainly do that. But I don't think it's necessarily worth the inclusion over like the fourth Knight of the Reliquary. I think I would have rather just have another one of those. And I think if you go into just green-white, you might be able to squeeze in some sort of Urza Saga. I've definitely seen people playing Urza Saga in these lists. That might be a little bit greedy, I'm not sure. But we didn't play against like the sort of tempo-y decks where you can kind of leverage your creatures that are going to be a bit bigger than your opponents, although I'm not sure how that fares in the world of Frog, but we do have answers for Frog. We got 5 clean answers and the Grist, which is pretty clean as well. So it'd be nice to try this against the sort of the big menaces of the format, like Grixis Tempo and Blue-Black Scam or Rescaminator. That was also, you know, we've got 2 endurance in the main deck, so we're clearly trying to keep an eye on some of the graveyard decks as well as Abadukabog. We just didn't really get paired into the stuff that I think would really make this deck shine. And we certainly got paired into some of the matchups that are going to be really tricky for us. All right, I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope the donor is pleased with my attempt at playing this one as well. If you would like to do a donation deck on the channel, I only charge £15, which is one of the lowest rates of donation decks for legacy content creators, so why not hop on by and help me out by supporting the channel and making me play whatever weird and wonderful stuff you would like. Just get in touch via the Discord or on my Patreon or whatever, and we can sort out for you. All right, little plug over there. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.